Hey guys, thank you for taking a minute to watch my video. I got going in the self-storage industry a little over 4 years ago, and I remember in the months leading up to that first project, I looked everywhere on the internet for any information I could find on developing storage facilities and found some really good stuff by guys who have forgotten more about storage than I'll probably ever know, like AJ Osborne, Nick Huber, just to name a couple. But I wasn't able to find a ton of information on developing facilities from the ground up, which is what I was going to be doing. So somewhere in that process, I decided when I learn what I'm doing, get a feel for things, I'm going to put everything I learned together and lay out the whole process from start to finish, and hopefully create a resource for someone looking to learn about developing storage facilities from the ground up. Fast forward 4 years in my life, we got that first project done. It's stabilized, um, doing really well. I currently have two other ground up construction projects going on, both at different points in the process. One, we just finished the zoning and engineering part of the process. Another's right in the middle of construction. So there's not going to be a better time for me, while everything's top of mind, to lay all this information out there and hopefully create a good resource for someone looking to learn. So I've organized all this information by splitting up the construction process into 13 phases to create this checklist. And my plan is to go through all of these phases and to talk about any mistakes that I've made, any important things I've learned, and really to hit it from the perspective of, if I could go back in time 4 years, what would I tell myself about each of these parts of the process? Now, I don't necessarily like the word checklist because it implies, go through the checklist, do all these things, and you'll be good to go. That's not necessarily true. Your experience is going to vary, sometimes drastically, based on your city and county regulations, what you're trying to build. There are a bunch of variables. So take my experiences and build on them. Make sure that they apply to what you're wanting to do, and hopefully you're able to learn something and avoid making some of the mistakes that I made. So there's a lot of information to get through here. We're talking about what's typically an 8 to 12 month process. So I'm going to do my best to condense all the information to things that I think you'll find useful. It is probably going to take a few videos to get through it all, so subscribe to the channel. Let me know if I'm missing anything, if your experiences line up with what I'm saying, or if there's anything you want me to talk about. I'd love to hear your feedback. Okay, so now it's time to get into the good stuff. I, real quick, want to go through the 13 phases just to kind of give you guys an overview of everything we're going to be talking about, and then we'll dive into this first phase. So we're going to start out by talking about what could be argued is the most important part of this whole process: analyzing markets, finding the location where you're going to start your project. This will make or break you. So a lot of time needs to be spent on this. I'm going to go through and kind of give you some of the data points, all of the data points that I like to collect to decide, whether or not to move forward on a property. Then we're going to go through zoning that land. Sometimes you don't have to go through this. I have in the past, and I have walked into a zoning meeting completely unprepared. Got denied. It was embarrassing, but I learned a lot from it and came back, got it through. It was a long process. It took months and months, but learned a lot. I'm going to tell you everything we did and, everything I learned from that. Next, we're going to talk about estimating the financial side of things for your project, both in the context of the cost of construction and estimating the income that your project's going to bring in once it's done. This will tee us up for the next phase, writing a business plan and finding financing, which the business plan is something that you can work on. I will post a template of my business plan that I use. I've worked hard on it and it looks good, but finding financing is one of the more difficult parts of this process, especially if you're just getting started. Banks want to know that you know your stuff, you're going to be reliable, and that they're going to get paid back for the loan that they give you. So we'll talk about how to present yourself in a way that makes them want to be part of your project. After that, we'll get into preparing your site for construction, all the things that go into getting it ready for the concrete to be poured and the steel to go up. We'll talk about engineering, dirt work, the hydrologists, the civil engineers, everything that goes into it. We'll talk about it. After that, we're going to talk about buying your materials, so your steel, your concrete, your fence and gate, all of that stuff, how to get a good deal on it, how to find reliable dealers for that stuff, and I also want to get into how COVID has affected that stuff, and what we've done to kind of circumnavigate those changes in costs from COVID. Next, we're going to talk about finding contractors and finding good contractors. This is really important to making sure your project's going to get done well. It's going to get done on budget. This is super important. I'll kind of share some of the things I've learned to find really, really good contractors and to kind of make them feel like they're part of our team, which they are. We'll talk about managing those contractors, holding them accountable. Ideally, this is something that over time you have to spend less and less energy on. I know that on my first project, I spent a lot more time kind of hovering over contractors, whereas now we've got excellent guys out there working. I know that stuff is going to be done right. I just say, call me if you need me, and stuff gets done. So we'll talk about that and kind of the process that led to that. Then we'll talk about, once the units are built, everything's done, how are we going to fill the units up? One of the more important things, because when construction's done, you're left with a bunch of empty units, a big payment coming up, and no money coming in. So we'll talk about how to really be aggressive at first and getting those units full, and some things that have worked for me. Then we'll talk about maximizing the income of your facility. Things like selling locks, boxes, ice machines, all kinds of stuff you can do to maximize the money coming in and maximize the profit. Then we'll talk about growing your business, expanding, when it's time to start looking at starting this process over. Where do you want to grow? Where do you want your next project to take place? And how are things different on those second, third, fourth projects as opposed to this first project? And then last, we're going to talk about something I don't have any firsthand experience with: selling your facility. So I'm going to be citing a lot of other people who have been through this and have found ways to maximize the profit from selling and minimize the taxes paid and money lost to things like that. So we'll be citing other people for that. I don't want to talk about anything I don't have firsthand knowledge of, and that's it. That's the 13 phases of construction. If you guys want anything added, please tell me. But now we're going to get going on our construction checklist finally. And the first thing we're going to talk about is analyzing markets. Now, what we're trying to do when we analyze a property or a market is maximize our probability of building a profitable, successful facility. And we're going to do that by collecting and analyzing relevant data. Now, I like to think of this process as kind of a funnel. We're going to start out at 30,000 feet and work our way in until we find a lot that may or may not work. When I begin analyzing a town or neighborhood for its feasibility for what I'm wanting to do, I begin with 7 basic data points: population, median household income, current square foot of storage per capita, the rates of those facilities, the capacity of those facilities, are there any destinations in this neighborhood, colleges, lakes, parks, etc., and what city or county governing body is in charge of the planning and zoning for this neighborhood. This information can help me to quickly and efficiently go through a large number of neighborhoods and towns to find really good opportunities in a relatively short amount of time. After finding a market that looks promising, I begin to narrow down the best specific locations in that market for a storage facility. And I do that by finding the densest areas of population, the most traveled roads, and the areas on these roads that have already been commercialized to some degree. In these areas, I begin to look for specific lots that are for sale and that have frontage on these busy roads and easy access in and out. Once I'm able to find a lot that's for sale and available, I look at estimating the amount of dirt work that's going to go into it. And we'll talk about that in a later video. This helps me estimate the cost of development and is a huge variable and potential curveball in a construction project. So that's the first thing I look at: is the lot a hill? Is it flat? How's the drainage? That sort of thing. And then I look at the current zoning of the property. If it's already commercial, that's huge. If it's not, I need to find out what are we going to need to do to make it commercial. And all this goes into estimating the cost to develop the lot. Once I'm able to estimate the cost of development, I begin to apply all of the data I've gathered to 3 really simple questions. The first, can I build this facility on this lot? And that's legally, financially, logistically. And then I look at, can I fill the units up? And last, I look at, can I charge the rates needed to make this facility profitable? Now, I take all of the data from all of the data points that I can gather and apply them to these 3 questions. And based off the data, I score each question with a confidence number of 1 through 10. By adding these 3 numbers up, I come up with an analysis score for that lot or that market. And that score plays a huge part in how we decide how to move forward. And guys, there are hundreds of other data points that I didn't have time to get to. I wanted to keep the video under 10 minutes, which I definitely was not able to do, but subscribe to the channel and maybe in the future we can go more in depth on this and really dive in. Let me know anything you thought about the video, if you'd like me to cover anything or do anything differently, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to make it to the end.